The US is pushing for a deal between Israel and Hezbollah. The armed group has signalled it won't link any ceasefire to an end to the war in Gaza. So what would be the terms of any settlement? And what does it all mean for Lebanon? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. As Israel continues to bombard Lebanon and Hezbollah to fire rockets into Israel, negotiations are being held behind closed doors for a deal between the two sides. But with a caretaker government unable to form a cabinet and no president for 2 years, Lebanon is in a war that's pushing its fragile institutions to breaking point as they struggle to respond to a growing humanitarian crisis. Why would Hezbollah consider a deal with Israel when it's vowed to keep fighting until Gaza sees peace? And how weakened is the armed group after months of Israeli strikes decimating its leadership? We'll be exploring these questions and more with our panel of experts in just a moment. First, this report by Axel Zajmovic.
After a year of conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, talk of a ceasefire. Under a leaked U.S. draft of a deal published by Israeli public broadcaster Khan, soldiers from the Lebanese army could replace Hezbollah's fighters. Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati struck an optimistic but cautious tone.
We are doing everything we can, and we must always keep trying and remain optimistic. Hopefully, in the coming hours or days, we'll see a ceasefire.
Under the draft agreement, 10,000 Lebanese soldiers would be deployed to the southern border, while Israeli forces would withdraw within a week of the hostilities ending. International monitors led by the United States and including European nations would oversee the transition.
Let me just say that we are working very hard and making progress on reaching understandings of what would be required for the effective implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701.
That resolution ended the 2006 Lebanon war. It means no weapons nor military infrastructure could be deployed south of the Litani River, except for those under control of the Lebanese army and the UN peacekeeping force. Israel was originally meant to remove all its troops from Lebanese territory. But the resolution was never fully implemented, and Israel continues to occupy parts of Lebanon, and Hezbollah is accused of building up its arsenal in the south. Hezbollah's reported willingness to consider pulling back from the border is a major shift from its previous stance. But Israel is demanding the right to respond militarily to any violations.
I would like to make it clear. The agreements, the papers, the proposals, all of these have their place, but they're not the main thing. The main thing is our ability and our determination to enforce security.
Lebanese officials, including Hezbollah, see that position as an infringement on their sovereignty. Both sides are reported to be negotiating through mediators while carrying out military operations to strengthen their bargaining positions. The success of this proposal may determine whether the region sees a path to stability or a descent into wider conflict. Axel Zajmovic, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guests now. They're all in Beirut. Jamal Ghosn is a writer and political commentator. Heiko Wimmen is project director for Iraq, Syria and Lebanon at the International Crisis Group. And Ronnie Chatah is a political commentator and host of the Beirut Banyan. A very warm welcome to all of you. As we saw there in Axel's report, the Lebanese caretaker prime minister hoped just yesterday that a ceasefire would begin within hours, within days. Already, it seems to be a very different story. Overnight strikes on Beirut has led him to believe that Israel has actually rejected a ceasefire deal. Heiko, what's going on?
Well, I mean, last 24 hours, of course, there were quite a few Israeli attacks, which doesn't sound like they want to have a ceasefire anytime soon. I saw the leaked draft documents that were circulated like 48 hours ago, and I really scratched my head and thought, I don't know who believes that on this side, I know that Hezbollah will agree to that, and it feels a bit like this was a stunt for the American presidential elections. We know there's a big Lebanese community in Michigan, which is a swing state. There's a substantial Lebanese community in Pennsylvania, which is a swing state. It doesn't look very serious to me, to be honest.
And of course, this is the second time that the US has proposed a ceasefire in the last few months. It proposed a 12-day one just at the beginning of this month, which sort of almost fell apart even before it began to be negotiated. Does it suggest that it really doesn't have much of an idea of the true situation in Lebanon? Ronnie?
I would look at it slightly differently. I think any ceasefire deal that emerges requires Lebanese state agency, which I don't think is there yet. And I'll offer a comparison to July and August 2006, when there was some form of a state capability to try at least to implement what is now known as 1701. 18 years later, I don't see the current regime, the way it's been configured, and to a large degree, the way it's been paralyzed the last 2 decades. I don't see it taking risks, at least for the moment. And I agree with Heiko, the draft that was leaked 2 or 3 days ago, it puts a lot of responsibility on a Lebanese government and a Lebanese army that I don't think will take risks necessary unless there's some type of political cover, or at least a regional understanding that a chapter is ending and something new is starting. And add to that, without serious pressure against both the Israelis and Iran in Lebanon, I don't see how this ends well for this country other than familiar stability. And stabilization is not resolution. Stability is what we've lived through since 2006, and it brought us to 2023, 2024. I fear that without some kind of resolution that largely ends external regimes' interference in Lebanese affairs, whether it's security or otherwise, I don't see how this plays out well for Lebanon in the long term.
OK. Jamal, you will have also seen these draft leaks of this proposal put forward by the US. What do you make of it?
It's a joke, seriously. I mean, if you want to really look at it, there's nothing serious about the proposal, or at least what was leaked of it. It is completely unacceptable from the Lebanese side. And then we saw that actually, even though it's 100% pro-Israel and it answers all the demands that they want, or all the wish list that Israel wants in Lebanon, they rejected it. So it's there's no seriousness in the negotiations going on right now. And we cannot take anything that the Israelis are doing seriously, because we saw what they did over the past year in Gaza. And we saw how they've evaded, or they've lied and continued to lie about progress in negotiations, only to evade any real resolution and to continue the genocidal war that they're carrying out.
Hezbollah, though, Jamal, has indicated a willingness for a ceasefire. Under what terms would it accept one?
Well, I mean, obviously, any ceasefire that does not end the ongoing genocide in Gaza is not serious. Anything that would keep a siege, whether on Gaza or in Lebanon, and keep millions of people besieged and in an open-air prison will not be acceptable. Anything that does not allow for people in the Palestinians and the Lebanese to go back to their normal lives and live normal lives, because they never had normal lives in Gaza. If the resolution or any solution that's proposed does not guarantee that, then there's nothing serious about them.
OK. Ronnie, Jamal, they're very much linking any ceasefire deal between Hezbollah and Israel to a ceasefire deal between Israel and Gaza, although indications were that it might be now 2 separate tracks. What do you make of it?
That was Hezbollah's position from day one, following October 7 and Lebanon's case October 8, and that there is a unity of arenas situation. And the precondition by Hezbollah at that time was that a ceasefire in Gaza is a prerequisite for an end to hostilities, at least between Lebanon and Israel, Hezbollah and Israel. I don't know if that is something that can be taken too seriously at the moment, given the extreme degradation and, in a way, restriction of Hezbollah's capabilities and how we've seen things played out in the last 2 months. I don't know if Hezbollah is in a good position right now. And I would take it one step further. I don't know what Iran can actually salvage at the moment vis-a-vis this round. In other words, what kind of security guarantees they can be given that to a degree allows Lebanon to be decoupled from Gaza. So I don't think we're there yet. But I don't know if Lebanon and Gaza can be coupled indefinitely. And I sense that there is an eagerness, and we see it being at least discussed, that the Lebanese government in its current capacity has also changed its tune. In the last few weeks, you've seen the caretaker prime minister really extend some kind of whatever's left of his local agency to demand 1701. Even Hezbollah, to a degree, even from 2006, has accepted 1701's parameters. I sense that everyone is eager to end this round in the short term. But coupling with Gaza, at least until now, I think it's not a serious scenario. And I sense that there will be a decoupling in the end.
Heiko, to what extent do you agree with Ronnie? Because the US has always said that a ceasefire in Gaza would bring de-escalation in Lebanon. Now it's saying the exact opposite. De-escalation in Lebanon has to happen before a ceasefire in Gaza. What do we make of all that?
Well, I mean, apparently there's the idea that Hezbollah and would be, so to speak, desperate enough to pressure Hamas to stand down as well, just to get a ceasefire. Look, I mean, it's really hard to tell right in the current round of fighting whether Hezbollah is as desperate and as close to collapse as the Israelis are portraying it, or whether Hezbollah is back on its feet and actually going into a calculated war of attrition that seeks to raise the cost for the Israelis to get a better deal, to get a bargain, which is what they say. So, and if you listen to the propaganda, I would say, on both sides, you could believe both things. You could believe that Hezbollah is about to collapse, and you could believe that Israel is suffering intolerable losses. I'm not sure if anybody really has the visibility to say that with a reasonable degree of certainty. But I mean, if Hezbollah is indeed, as they say, as they display it, confident in its capacity to continue this fight, actually wants to continue this fight, drag it out to get better terms, then of course the idea that bait Hezbollah with a ceasefire to get them to put pressure on Hamas, then that idea will obviously fall out the window.
Jamal, does Hezbollah want to continue the fight?
They've expressed it directly. They said they did not seek this fight. They do not want this fight to continue, but it is connected to the ongoing genocide in Gaza. So this is, they will stop the day the genocide stops. So this is, but to answer some of the comments that were made by the other two guests, I mean, yes, there are contradicting stories about where Hezbollah stands right now in terms of military and capabilities to continue the war. And we heard Sheikh Naim Qasim say the other day that they can go for days and weeks and even months. But the idea is that's not where we look for answers. We can look at the battlefront. We've seen 4 divisions for the past month of the Israeli military trying to enter Lebanon on a ground invasion, and all they've been able is to cross a few hundred meters in, bomb a few houses, and then withdraw and take heavy losses for that photo op that they're trying to pass as victory to their public. And they haven't been able to, despite the superior military prowess that they haven't been able to hold a single village on the front, which is hundreds of meters from the border. So, so to say that Hezbollah has been degraded or that they've been weakened is an exaggeration. And we've also seen change in the rhetoric of the Hezbollah opposition in a couple of weeks ago, after they took the series of hits, starting with the pager attacks to the assassination of their leadership. We've seen people celebrating prematurely in Lebanon and trying to trying to make gains or trying to cash in the gains of the Israeli aggression. But that tone, even that tone has disappeared, and we've seen people have backed off a bit, and they see that Hezbollah is still standing on its feet and very much ready to fight for the foreseen future.
Ronnie, that series of hits that Jamal talks about, it was huge, wasn't it? The pager attacks that targeted some 2,000 people, the decapitation of the leadership of Hezbollah, the ongoing bombardment of military facilities linked with the financial aspects, with the medical aspects. And that, as we see from last night, is still going on. How weakened does other people in Lebanon see Hezbollah to be at this stage?
I think in a sense, both statements are true. In other words, Hezbollah fighters are experienced fighters. This is not the first round they've had with Israeli soldiers. And this is familiar terrain. I mean, it's less than 2 decades ago. This round led to a standstill, if you will, in the south that produced a ceasefire, 1701. Hezbollah is most familiar with fighting Israel. Even though that has not been what they've been doing for the better part of 2 decades, they're still an experienced paramilitary force. So I think that is true. They can fight aggressively from Lebanon and at times succeed. I think the opposite end, which is the capabilities of Iran's security, and how that security is expressed, whether it's through a paramilitary force like Hezbollah or what the Iranian regime is trying to gain diplomatically from this round, I think that's been severely curtailed. And I don't think it's an understatement to say that Hezbollah has taken a heavy blow beyond the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, which is in itself a big psychological blow to the group. And I don't think that can be understated. The entire command structure and the communications disaster that we saw playing out in Lebanon, with over 1,500 Hezbollah members injured, whether it's maimed or losing arms, hands, that has taken a serious blow. But it does not spell out the defeat of Hezbollah. I think that would be taking it too far. And I don't think the Israelis can actually defeat Hezbollah. And I don't really think that's what they're trying to do either. I think what is happening on the battlefield is that the Israelis are trying to handicap Hezbollah from ever fighting Israel again from Lebanon. What that means long-term in Lebanon is premature. What Hezbollah looks like later, I think it's too early to tell. But it's clear that unfortunately, the security situation that's been played out in recent months has been largely on Israel's terms. And hence you've seen widespread destruction. 25% of the population of this country is displaced. You have almost the same buffer zone re-emerging that existed in the south prior to Israel's withdrawal in May 2000, happening once more, except depopulated and destroyed by constant Israeli shelling, constant Israeli bombing, and the destruction of villages. I think that is the security situation, and in a sense, a nightmare for Lebanon that's being played out. And the reason I'm going far in my language is because this is really the failure of diplomacy. Diplomacy this round required a Lebanese government that could take a role that it hasn't played in a long time.
Okay, let me just jump in there because I want to pick up on that, because we've talked a lot about the military, the security aspect of Lebanon. Now let's, as you say, Ronnie, drill down into the political situation. Heiko, Lebanon's been without a president for 2 years now. Is the country any closer to electing one now than it has at any other of the 12 times it's tried to?
I don't really think so. I mean, we are still, when it comes to presidential elections and then the formation of a government, I mean, we are still in the same situation that there's a division, that the country is divided, is deeply polarized. Obviously, the conflict now, like the war that has been going on, only increases that polarization. As one side of politics accuses Hezbollah of dragging Lebanon into a war, frivolously or recklessly, and Hezbollah believes and increasingly believes that the other side, its opponents, are carrying water for Israel. and the US. So the polarization is still there, and I think from the perspective, or Hezbollah sees these attempts to now fix the Lebanese system, perhaps, or at least to find a president or push through a president and establish a government as an attempt to use the Lebanese institutions to coerce it into standing down, into not only ending the fight, accepting to a ceasefire on Israeli terms, but to accept disarmament and all these demands, all these earlier UN resolutions. Now, I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm not saying that this is what the other side plans. But if Hezbollah and its allies sees it that way, then I don't think we are any closer to a solution of the political stalemate. And if the pushing gets too hard, then I think there's also a potential for violence, unfortunately.
Right. Okay, so Jamal, let's pick up on that. We've got the Speaker of Parliament, of course, a Shia, Nabi Berri, saying that he supports the election of a president who does not represent a challenge to anyone. Is there such a person?
Yes, they can bring any figurehead president with no powers that can be pushed by both sides, and but that's not. I mean, it's too soon and too early to talk about presidential elections. I think the result of the war will have a heavy impact on who is selected president. They don't elect a president here; they basically select it and select him. And there's obviously. There are two major candidates, one for each camp. There's a point that we haven't made at all during the show, and we forgot to mention that this is not just an Israeli aggression on Lebanon. This is an American-Israeli aggression on Lebanon, and they are very much involved in terms of supplying weapons and pushing for political solutions that serve Israel and American interests. And they want the Lebanese army general, Army Commander Joseph Aoun as a president that would represent American interests in Lebanon. I think that will never happen as long as the Lebanese resistance is not defeated. So that's off the table right now. And then on the other side, of course, there's a preference for Sleiman Frangi, who would be the choice of the pro-resistance camp. But again, this is we're very far from electing a president. This is not, and it's not the magical solution that will end all the problems of the Lebanese state. The Lebanese state needs to be rebuilt on proper pillars that never existed throughout the history of Lebanon, and that's something that's a major project that needs all political powers to put all their hands together to do that.
Be that as it may, Ronnie, we do have a vacuum that needs filling, and Hezbollah and its allies, they have been breaking the quorum that's needed in Parliament to hold a vote every single time they've tried to, because they do not support the opposition candidate. The question is now, with Hezbollah taking the hits that it has and being involved in this war that Lebanon doesn't want, are these allies willing to stand by Hezbollah?
I think looking a bit in terms of recent history, the scenario that we currently have, regardless of where Hezbollah is on the battlefield, I think the situation we're in is that the Lebanese state and how it expresses itself in terms of even demands and diplomacy has been battered to the point of barely expressing anything that is other than preserving Hezbollah's interests, and by extension, Iran. Even though there is still a government and there is still state agency to a degree, the Lebanese interest in disengagement and to a degree distancing itself, the country to its fullest extent, distancing itself, whether it's Hamas and Israel or other conflicts later, that expression has been battered. It has been systematically targeted. And I think the polarization discourse misses one point, which is that this is not two sides of equal measure. These are not two security fronts battling for leverage in Lebanon. There is a security force sponsored by Iran that has strangled Lebanese politics. And the opposition that we've been talking about I don't think has the tools necessary, through politics at least, to challenge that order. And I'll go one step further. I don't think we're there yet. In other words, it's too early to tell how this round ends. And I don't think Hezbollah will be defeated in a way that is extreme, whether that's Israeli discourse or otherwise. And I don't know what Hezbollah will express itself long-term, at least politically. But without the dignified exit for Hezbollah fighters to join the Lebanese army, and this is maybe a pipe dream, but without an honorable end to Hezbollah as a paramilitary force in this country, I fear stability will dictate the long term, meaning stabilization that has kept, for many years, other problems in Lebanon too, whether it was the Syrian occupation until 2005 or the Israeli occupation until May 2000. I see a battlefield scenario that calms down, but does not allow Lebanon to regain its lost independence. That is a mission that is also, it's a roadmap, if you will, that's not just in 1701, obviously, it's in other resolutions too. Some of them are brought up from time to time, some of them are not, whether it's 1680 vis-a-vis Syria and the Syrian border, or whether it's 1559, the disarmament of all sub-state militia. I fear, and I'll just, one more thing, I fear that unless all of these things are addressed this round, you will see a return to August 2006, and unfortunately, another round of conflict.
Okay, well, let's just round off the discussion by returning to the military situation, because this proposed deal does talk about a 10,000-strong Lebanese army occupying the southern area of Lebanon to enforce Resolution 1701 and previous resolutions, which, of course, call for the disarmament of Hezbollah and for it to retreat beyond the Litani River. Heiko, is this a realistic possibility?
Well, that's a tall order, obviously. Has a question already. Look, I mean, the bottom line is, in this is Hezbollah going to cooperate, or is Hezbollah going to be completely destroyed as a military actor that it is no longer in the position to withhold cooperation, right? If the answer to both questions is no, they don't cooperate and they're not beaten sufficiently to be taken out of the equation, then it's unimplementable. And I mean, a senior American official once told one of my colleagues, everybody knew in 2006 that 1701 was unimplementable. And we may indeed, I agree with Ronnie, we may end up in a similar situation as we were in August 2006, where basically Israel decides, okay, we achieved enough for now, and achieving what we really want requires time and investment that we are not willing to make. And then we are back to 2006, or the conflict may continue for months and months to come. That is unfortunately also a possibility.
Well, on those two possibilities, we'll have to leave our discussion for today. Many thanks indeed to all our guests for joining us, Jamal Ghosn, Heiko Wimmen and Ronnie Chatah. And thank you too for watching. You can see this programme again anytime by visiting our website, that's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, do go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here, bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.